Hey there, welcome back to Pepper Geek. In today's video, I'll be discussing flower drop on pepper plants. Now, flowers are of course very important for your pepper plant's productivity. They are what ultimately turn into your pepper pods, so without flowers, you're not getting any peppers. So when you're ready for your plant to start producing peppers for you, you want to see a lot of flowers, and it can be concerning when they start to fall from the plant. So as a result, this is a very common question we get asked. Why are all the flowers falling off of my pepper plants? What can I do to stop it and improve fruit sets? So I have several common reasons for flower drop on pepper plants. I'm going to go through each of them, starting with the most common cause and ending with some that are less common, but certainly possible. Before I get started, check us out on Instagram. We post exclusive pictures of our pepper plants and our interesting pepper varieties. I actually just started an experiment a few weeks ago, trying to grow peppers from seeds starting in June, and that plant just sprouted. So if you're interested in seeing how that turns out, go follow us on Instagram at Pepper Geek. Okay, so flower drop. Let's start with the most common reason, and that is that peppers simply drop a lot of their flowers naturally. Flowers tend to overproduce in order to attract pollinators, and only some of those flowers will actually set and become fruits. So if you have large plants, you'll see lots of flowers, and some of them are just going to fall naturally. The natural life cycle of a flower is the flower begins to form, it opens up and begins producing pollen. That attracts pollinators like bees and other insects that naturally pollinate the flower. Pepper flowers contain both male and female reproductive organs, meaning that each flower can be self-pollinated. And if that flower is successfully fertilized by an insect or wind or whatever it is, then the flower will begin to set fruit. The petals of the flowers usually fall off, and then the fruit will begin to form from within. Now, while I'm on the subject of natural causes, some pepper varieties are simply more productive than others. It's just built into the DNA of the plant, and they can only produce so many peppers per plant. Bell peppers, for example, really only produce a handful of peppers each year. In our experience, I know there are ways to get more out of them, but since the peppers are so big and they demand so much energy from the plant, we really only see a few peppers in production on each plant at a time. So while the plant is focusing energy on producing that fruit and the seeds within, it doesn't have the energy to start production on another pepper. And if it does, we often see that those secondary peppers are smaller and less developed. On the other hand, if you're growing smaller pepper varieties, you may end up with thousands of pods if your plants are large enough. So keep that in mind, look into the individual pepper varieties that you're growing and see what realistic productivity looks like. Another cause for flower drop is container size. So in a similar vein to the pepper variety, if your plants are growing in smaller containers, the soil and the nutrients within can really only support a certain number of peppers at a time. This, for example, is a limon pepper that really should be in a larger pot by now, but it's not. And it's starting to already try to produce peppers, but there are really only a few. If I had this in a larger container by now, there would be many more peppers. So if you're trying to grow a bell pepper, again, for example, in a small pot, maybe a 1-gallon pot, you might only get one pepper. So the plant has a way of knowing how much it can actually support, but if you were to move that plant into a larger pot, say a 5-gallon pot or a 10-gallon pot, the productivity of those plants will be much greater and you'll have less flower drop. Another reason for flower drop is excessively high temperatures. Now this varies by plant variety. Some pepper plants like it a little bit cooler, some can really tolerate high heat, like jalapenos and other New Mexico varieties that were specifically bred for those conditions, but many pepper varieties really don't like super hot weather. So if you're in the middle of a heat wave or you simply live in a place where it is very hot, like southern Florida or Arizona, you may struggle to keep your peppers cool enough to set fruits. And the reason for this is when it's very hot, your plant uses more water and it's essentially stressed, so it's going to cut back productivity basically in order to survive. A lot of times when the weather starts to cool off later in the season, we'll see productivity go way up and flower drops go way down. So one thing you can do if you're growing in containers is move those containers to a place where it's shaded during the hottest parts of the day, usually around 2 or 3 p.m. Another thing you might want to try is to sprinkle them with some cool water on very hot days. If you notice your plants are stressed in the heat, they're wilting their leaves, sprinkle them with some cold water all over the foliage, and that should really help cool down the plants. Another common cause for flower drop on peppers is excessive nitrogen. If you're using chemical fertilizers or really anything that has high levels of accessible nitrogen, you may get a very healthy looking large bushy plant, but low productivity. And that's because nitrogen really encourages leafy growth, more stems. That's why we encourage you to use a higher nitrogen fertilizer early in the season to get a larger plant, and then about halfway through the season cutting back on nitrogen and giving more phosphorus and potassium for better fruit sets. Now there are specific fertilizer regimens that you can use, like the Fox Farm Trio that starts with Grow Big, more nitrogen, and then switches to Big Bloom and Tiger Bloom, which has lower nitrogen and higher phosphorus and potassium. So if you're using a lot of fertilizer, this may be the cause. Too much nitrogen can definitely lead to low productivity. Another possible cause for your flower drop is overwatering. Overwatering can cause a plethora of issues. We seem to mention it in every pepper problem video because overwatering is very stressful to the plants. It causes them to basically shut down, stop growing, stop producing flowers, etc. But it really only happens when the water gets trapped in the containers and has nowhere to flow away. So if the soil seems soggy after a lot of rain, or your water can't escape from your potted plants when you're watering, it may sit and pool up at the bottom of your containers, causing those roots to basically rot or drown. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. Just don't overwater your pepper plants. Keep them evenly watered. Don't let them dry out. Don't let them become soggy. And another thing that could possibly cause your flowers to drop is poor pollination. Now, like I said before, pollination is essential for your flowers to become peppers. Without pollinators, or at least a little help from the wind, your flowers may have a hard time pollinating themselves. Now, this is very uncommon outdoors, but if you're growing indoors in a grow tent, this may very well be the reason for your flowers dropping. We always do some form of hand pollination when we're growing indoors exclusively, by either shaking the plants a little bit or by rubbing our fingers gently in each flower and going throughout the plant to make sure the pollen can get onto the stigma of each flower. And that's really it. I hope this helps you figure out why your pepper flowers may be falling off. Again, some flower drop on peppers is totally natural. We see thousands of flowers on some of our plants, and many of them just fall off naturally. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps us out. And leave a comment below if you have any questions. We'd be happy to try to help. Thanks for watching Pepper Geek, and I'll see you next time.